Today we are joined by Rosanne Werner, CEO at XcelerateIQ, a visionary leader reshaping how organisations approach digital and data transformation with a people-first mindset. In this episode, Rosanne shares her remarkable journey from chartered accountant to data and digital strategy expert.
It wasn't just about the education side of things, but how do we make it into a movement? So how do we help people not only upskill in terms of reading, understanding, interpreting and communicating with data, but how do we build a community around data?
We also dive into the conversation around what are traditionally called soft skills.
How do you communicate with people? How do you articulate your ideas? How do you influence, motivate people? How do you build the trust with people that don't work with data? So how do you bring them on board?
This conversation is an inspiring reminder of how putting people first can power the future of technology and data. Enjoy! Rosanne, let's talk data.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, welcome. Welcome to the show. I always think it's interesting, data journeys. Of course, you started life as an accountant.
Yes.
Then you joined Coca-Cola in 2014 as a commercial finance lead. And then by 2022, you were a digital and data strategy and transformation lead.
Yes.
So quite the journey. That is amazing. So how did that all happen?
So yes, I did start my journey as an accountant. So I'm actually a fully qualified chartered accountant from Deloitte in Australia.
Amazing.
And so I did a lot of finance transformation throughout biotech, mining, oil and gas, and then at Coca-Cola. And there was that finance transformation piece where it was about the system change and everyone was going for that go live date. But then we think, how do we change how people act and use those systems? It gets left behind in terms of people. We expect that people can change by a 1 hour workshop or an e-learning course, and then Jane from accounts payable would magically change to the new system. They're not brought on board, and there's that fear of change. So I was doing finance transformation at Coca-Cola as well, but focusing on the people side element of it. And they were setting up their data and analytics team. And it wasn't just about the education side of things, but how do we make it into a movement? So how do we help people not only upskill in terms of reading, understanding, interpreting and communicating with data, but how do we build a community around data, that it's a movement, it challenges status quo, we solve problems together with data? How do we share success stories and encourage each other on the data journey?
Yeah, a movement is such a good word because there is a misconception, isn't there, that it's like a program of works. Like there's an end date, there's data strategy, and then everyone understands it. Brilliant. But that's not the case at all.
No.
It's a mindset shift. Did Coca-Cola then have that foresight, would you say, through a successful financial transformation when there is that element of change, of course, with systems and whatnot? Did that then lend yourself, you think, like a position where it was easier for the organisation to change because you'd been on a similar journey?
Well, Coca-Cola is quite a people-first company. It has a really good culture, and we knew that you can't just implement a e-learning course and expect people to change. So people are complex beings built on habits and ways of working and experiences, and it's taking that from where people are on different journeys or different functions. We've got different territories in the program. And how do we bring those people together on that kind of same hymn sheet about what the data strategy is about? What's my role to play? How can I bring that catalyst back into my teams and influence them on how they approach data, how they interact data, communicate with data? So education is part of it, but it's that engagement and community and driving that behaviour that makes the change last, because you're embedding it into that organisation culture.
Yeah, of course. And to have a successful strategy program of works around it, of course, it's complicated. There's many different layers. But would you say fundamentally taking a people-first approach is key?
Yeah. You can have the best tools in the world. You can have the most, smooth processes. But without the people being on board, they're just going to sit there. You're going to have a bike that's sitting there that's not being ridden on. It's not going to take you anywhere. And it's people don't learn overnight. So you need to take the time to change ways of thinking, how people transform what habits and at work that they identify themselves with, and take them on the journey in terms of why we're doing this change, how we're supporting you through this change. People deal with change differently. So what are the different resources and avenues to help them deal with that change? And then support that with a good communication strategy in terms of the hearing about why we're doing this. They feel part of the change. They're hearing it from the leaders. They're showing it by example. So it's really hearing, feeling, discussing it with your peers that drives that change.
Yeah. And that transformation was award winning or award nominated, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we were recognised in the Data IQ Awards for Best Skills Development Program.
Amazing.
And it was also recognised in the IDC Foundry CIO 100 Award in Spain. So, and internally, it won a lot of passion for growth categories because people saw how data was going to help them with their work and how it could help inform better decisions, and how do we ingrain that into the day-to-day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how did you personally find the transition from finance to digital and data? I know it's not uncommon in a sense that it makes sense, but it is different at the same time. So how did you find that transition?
Yeah, so I found finance is like finance data, but then moving into the data and digital side of things, it was like, okay, there's more than finance data. There's a story behind the finance data that comes from the commercial data, the supply chain data, how much did we sell to customers and how do we produce on the lines, and that then trickled down through to then the finance data. So having that kind of overall approach and view on what data is and how the end-to-end approach of it. And then also the digital innovation side of things. So how do we help use technology to help us with our work? How do we use technology to help us work more efficiently, more collaboratively, and leaving times for more the value-adding stuff, the creative stuff that we enjoy?
Yeah. So what made you decide to leave then? And hopefully it was quite a legacy you left behind at Coca-Cola, and start your own business, Accelerate IQ.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it at Coca-Cola, the people, the culture. It's one of the biggest brands in the
Of
world.
course it is.
But I was there for 10 years and I had that calling of actually I love what I did at Coca-Cola. We brought it from a concept on a piece of paper to a global program that was recognized on a number of awards. I have people from all over the world that's on this program ping me and goes, oh, how much I enjoyed it, how much it impacted my work.
Wow.
And part of me thought, well, I'm seeing other organizations having this struggle. How can I take a bet on myself in terms of this is what I love doing, it's what energizes me. Can I make a bigger impact on other organizations and on a global level?
Yeah, I love that you say take a bet on yourself, because it is that, isn't it? You've got to back yourself, and why shouldn't you, I suppose, with that experience. So how did that come from a concept to actually fruition to starting your business? It's never easy journey, but how did you find that as a journey?
It's like a big balancing act. I say first
Yeah.
thing is, I mean, coming from a finance background, do you have the financial support to take that bet on yourself?
Yeah,
Are you able
yeah.
to still feed your family while you're taking that bet? And then also having a real plan of building that business that aligns with your goals and values. How do you identify that key problem to solve for businesses, and then building those systems and processes that can take a lot of the grunt work, and then you can focus on solving those problems with
Yeah.
the clients. And you'll get 1,000 no's, and it's having that resilience to pick yourself up and reframe the setbacks in terms of, okay, what have I learned from this? How would I do things differently? And view it as it's a no for now.
Yes. Yeah, always a no for now. Absolutely. As a
Yeah.
recruiter, I can relate to that. So how long has the business been established for?
18 months. I'm in my second year now.
18 months, amazing. So still in the infancy, really, for sure. And in terms of the problems that you're solving, are they the same problems 18 months ago that you're seeing?
I think the development of AI has kind of accelerated that
Yeah.
quite a bit. in terms of it's not just the data adoption and utilization, it's also the fear around AI taking my job. How do I keep up? The AI fatigue on there's so many tools out there. How do I help get on board and find out what are the tools that will actually help me with my job?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the problems have widened the critical skills gap in terms of things are changing so quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but organization teams habits don't change as quickly, so
No,
it's
yeah.
managing that.
Yeah, of course. And you shared a statistic recently. I think 70 to 95% of data and digital transformations fail, often due to the people element being overlooked.
Mm.
So, do you prepare clients for this risk then? But do some of them not take on that advice? Or how do you really put it to them that this is the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. What I see is a lot of clients go for the shiny tool, they
Of
go for the
course.
technology, they go for the processes. It's also probably something quite tangible.
Mm,
But then if you're not bringing the people along that journey from the start, when you switch that system on or when that tool is ready, you hear crickets.
yeah.
People are like, well, how do I embed this in my day to day? What do I need to do differently? The training session I did 3 months ago, I've forgotten how to apply it to my day to
Of
day.
course.
So I always advise companies when you're taking on a transformation journey, bring the people at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
not at the end, because it's going to be harder and you're not going to realize the value from the investment in that data and technology as
Yeah.
quickly as if you've got the people on board and they're driving that change.
Yeah. And what kind of organizations do you partner with? Are they in the infancy of data strategy or is it a mix?
It's a mix.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking to companies across the globe, so US, Austria, Australia. It's the same problem exists,
Of
just in
course.
different industries, in different sizes, different stages,
Mm-hmm.
but the people element's always there. So
Mm.
it's finding out where they are at on that journey, finding out what ticks the boxes in terms of what the culture like, what's a communication strategy like, what's the communication styles like in that organization, what's the leadership styles like, and then partnering with them to solving that problem as opposed to coming in with a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah.
So it's really listening to what makes that culture tick
Mm-hmm.
and then weaving data and AI into it with the people element.
Of course, yeah. Do you think that smaller businesses have an advantage because they can be agile? Because larger organizations that have done things the same way for
Mm,
many years, no
mm,
doubt, and I'm sure data isn't the only issue in terms of change. That is tough. That is tough to change mindset. But logistically, huge organizations, multiple systems, different ways of doing things, different silos, is it possible for organizations that are large, like thousands plus,
mm.
to really embed successful data strategy?
I do believe so. And
Yeah.
we saw that as a really success story at Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
We get focused on the data catalysts, the change makers within the different parts of the organization, and they were the ones that were either specifically picked out or they volunteered because they had the drive and ambition. They wanted the change, and getting them on board in terms of that same hymn sheet on this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is how it benefits you, and then they can go back to their teams to then challenge status quo in terms of, well, this is what the rest of the organisation is doing. This is the strategy. This is the business outcome we want to get. Are you on board? How are you implementing this in your day to day? So it's kind of having that catalyst change makers group that then advocates that, amplifies that to the rest of their business. So you can do change at scale
Yes.
through that change makers approach.
Yeah. And the fact that you've got a background in that at a company such as Coca-Cola is going to help and be testament to the fact that it is possible.
Definitely.
And do you see, in terms of like people adopting it, does it surprise you with like the reluctance to really commit to it as a full cultural shift rather than just a project, for example?
Yeah, it's what I'm finding is that organizations understand that there's a education upskilling gap,
Mm.
but then they're throwing money at e-learning literacy programs, and we know that if would you jump into a taxi if the taxi driver learnt through just reading the driving manual?
No.
Would you trust the surgeon that to operate you if all they've learnt is YouTube videos?
Mm-hmm.
So it's about okay, you've learnt something, but how do you apply it? How have you practiced it? How have you discussed with others to find out what your blind spots are? How have you shared the success stories or the learnings and trigger that change across the organisation?
Yeah, I understand that different businesses want different outcomes and it is based on their own needs and desires. But what tangible outcomes and ROI can businesses expect from successful data adoption?
The first one is you look at your dashboard and your tools. Are they using it?
Mm.
What's the uptake? Are people actually going into the tools, and how long are they in the tools for? So when we set off Copilot at Coca-Cola, there's a dashboard that goes, okay, well, if we don't bring the people on board, you can tell that they've accessed it, but then the dwell time is 5-10 minutes. They've gone back to their old habits. So the
Yeah.
immediate metrics is, are your tools being used? And how long are they using it for? And then on the other side is like, okay, well, how your team's using the data to inform better decisions, and are you seeing it in the business outcomes? Are you seeing it in your key metrics? And so it's that immediate measure, and then also how do you tie that into your business outcomes?
Yeah, so using data to track if the data's successful.
Exactly.
So Copilot, were they quite early adopters then of
Yes.
Copilot at Coca-Cola?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it now company-wide used,
Um,
successfully adopted?
I'd say it's a whole, like, if you give data to the masses, it's overwhelming. It's like, okay, well, what are the specific use cases that you can see Copilot helping you before you get the license? So it's really making good use of that resource. So it helps people to go, okay, well, being curious about how Copilot can help their work,
Mm.
and then putting forward those use cases so then other people can also learn from the use cases to help their work as well.
Yeah, there's so much psychology involved with this. Like, if I think about myself, you cannot take me away from pen and paper. And I know, like, why I should be writing notes on my CRM. And I do, because 3 weeks later, when I go to a record, I'm like, where are the notes? They're on an envelope somewhere. But I struggle to change that habit. But there is so much psychology. And is that something you understand or you've taught yourself or you've learned really to back the need for this shift in mindset and how long it does actually take?
It comes back to habits, and everyone's got their own habits and their triggers that trigger certain habits. How many of us wake up in the morning and the first thing we do is check our phones? How many of us open our laptops and the first thing we do is check our emails? So it's tapping into those triggers of habits, and then okay, if you want to write notes with your CRM because you like the pen and paper, how about taking a photo of the notes and then it translating it to you, and then you can have it a soft copy.
Good idea.
And so little things like that. So
Yeah.
so the trigger would be at the end of each note taking. Let me try it for that. What take you 5 minutes, right? Take a photo, upload it onto your notes, and then you have a soft copy of it.
Genius.
And then you'll have Copilot, and then you can have that search and use the notes. And how do I put that into a meeting notes, or how would I put that in a presentation? And it's just trigger that. But the first step is just take that photo, try it, and
Yeah.
then build that curiosity and creativity on what next.
Yeah, sounds simple, but yeah, it's just adding another step in, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And my future self will be very grateful that I did that. How do you find small business life compared to big business life? Because for me, starting a small business, I've worked in businesses at like 30 to 50, so quite small organizations, but Coca-Cola is a beast of a business. And to go from that life to startup, how was that transition?
It's a massive balancing
Yeah.
act in terms of your time, your resources, your energy. I talked about systems and processes before. Like how can we use the tools to help us do a lot of the grunt work and then focus on, okay, identifying what clients want and actually bringing that value. So it's being really disciplined of showing up every day and being consistent of showing up every day, but then also really identifying what is it that you're doing, what is the value and outcome of why you're setting up this business, and then what problems that you're solving, and then being really crucial about what your priorities are, setting the boundaries, and I mean, when you're running a small business, sometimes you're wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah.
So how many of those hats can you to delegate, whether to tools or offshore it, so then you can really focus on what you do best.
Yeah.
And it's finding that balance to do that.
Do you think you found the balance?
I think I'm where I was 18 months ago. I'm going, wow, that's a big journey that I've gone. But we're always learning. We're
Of
always
course.
tools are changing. So it's like, okay, well, actually, there's a new tool. Would that help me with X, Y, and Z that's taking a long time? So it's continuously learning and adapting to refine that over time.
Have you had a mentor with someone who started their own business? I mean, I know the power of networking, community, and data is just amazing. Have you leaned on people for advice on like, how do I do this?
Yes, definitely. I've got a partnership with a company, and I'm quite close with the CEO that I bounce off ideas on a regular basis, and he set up his own company as well. And it's kind of understanding, okay, well, how do I deal with the sales funnel? How do I deal with the legal side of things of setting up a business and agreements and the approach, the outreach? So it's really good to have. Yeah, I've been finding that mentorship really quite useful
Yeah, it's
nowadays.
so important because it can be absolutely overwhelming. And as an individual, I get very distracted. And I actually had someone on the podcast who said his advice was don't take advice. And it took me a moment, but I was like, I get that because when you do start a business, and like we said, it's great, there is a lot of great advice out there, but at the same time, everybody wants to give you advice. And if you follow all of that advice, you're not really achieving anything because you're just flip flopping. So you've then got to trust your gut, like you said. What problems am I solving? What's my passion? What's the purpose behind the business? And maybe go back to basics again. Does that resonate?
Yeah. And that whole self care piece, giving yourself the room to think, giving yourself the room to just nothing to kind of trigger that curiosity, that aha moment. It's so easy to keep going and keep going and keep going. It's giving
Yeah.
yourself that time and that space to go, okay, why am I doing this? You know, what is it that's driving me, and what do I focus on to continually get better?
Yeah, it's very hard to switch off. And I know it is in careers, not just for business owners. But because I started my business in COVID, there was nothing else to do but work. And I was in we must survive mode, like, please. So I just worked all hours of the day because there was nothing else to do. And I feel very lucky and privileged that I had a focus and something that I did get up for in the morning. But then as things started to get back to normal, although we didn't really return to normal, a new way of working, I didn't let go of that. And I just stopped seeing people. I prioritized work over everything. I lost friendships. I lost myself for a bit. And that is so tough because when do you stop? Like, and have you found that a struggle as well?
I don't think there's a like one size fit all answer. I
No.
think it's you've and that self care time is
Mm.
really crucial to kind of understand
Mhm.
what is it that drives me. And I believe me, when you're in the flow and
Yeah.
you're like creativity flowing, and it's give yourself the benefit of being in the flow, because that deep work. But I think it also depends on the resources that's available to you, the support network that you have, and then also your energy level. Some people have crazy energy and they can go at 100 million miles an hour. Some people aren't that. It's finding your special niche in terms of how you deal with that, where your boundaries are, and the boundaries could be, actually, I want to spend more time on this focus because I'm on the flow, or actually focus flow is actually quite low at the moment. I'm going to spend it with my family and friends. It's finding that balance that works for you. I don't think there's any
Yeah.
the whole not taking advice thing. I think you got to find that balance for you and what works
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. And self awareness, because I think this is where flexibility can come in, because you can be like 6 o'clock in the morning, like, I'm ready to go. I'm literally like, I'm ready to call people, but I can't call them at 6. Maybe 8's fine. But, when you're in the moment, like you said, really take advantage of that. But if you're not having a good day or good afternoon, be kind to yourself. And if the reality is you're just sat at your computer doing nothing, then just step away for a bit.
Go for a walk.
Yeah.
Go for a walk. I always go, if you go into a brain slump, go for a walk. Just put your shoes on, go for a walk. Whether it's
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes, and I think scientifically your brain actually,
Of course it does.
your creativity does flow. So
Yeah.
just a habit. Put your shoes near the door and go for a walk.
Yeah. And you cycle, don't you?
Yes.
And does that help you switch off from the world of work?
I cycle every Sunday with my cycling crew. We meet on Sunday mornings, and it's between like 80 to 100 kilometers on a Sunday.
Wow.
And I love it because I'm away from my phone. I'm
Mm.
away from kids' responsibilities. I can actually switch off and focus on breathing, focus on that next hill, focus on the next mile. And it's a really good community as well. And that sense of achievement at the end of the day, it just feels really good. And being outside and just not on the phone or in front of the computer, that's how I recharge my batteries. Even though
Yeah.
I'm knackered
Or
afterwards.
deplete. Depends which way you look at it. But yeah, very grounding when you do an activity, when you've been away from the digital world. But it's nice to, of course, have that sense of achievement, but in a different way. So how long does that take you then, that level of cycling?
Between 3 to 5 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And every Sunday,
Every
wind, rain,
Sunday.
snow.
Yes.
That is a
Apart from when it
commitment.
snows.
And how about data with cycling then? Are you really into that data, or do you just try and not get too obsessed with it? Because we can track everything nowadays.
Yes, you can track everything. Everything's on Strava.
Yeah.
I tend to look at my PRs to see, how did I perform. But everyone's got their on and off days, and it's just I look at it, but I don't take too much.
You don't
Yeah,
obsess over
exactly,
it. Yeah, because data is an interesting one. And I do like to ask data people, because I think you can get too into the data and there's still an element of intuition. So how do you balance that in terms of your own personal decision making?
I find like the intuition is a reflection of your experience, your past learning. So I think data helps bring that objectivity to that intuition. It helps challenge what your gut feel is saying, but then it also helps us uncover any bias that we might not be aware of, any hidden patterns. It helps challenge our assumptions and our intuitions to help us make decisions better.
Yeah, it does. And going back to data strategy and those that you've partnered with, why do you find, because where data sits can be an issue in itself? Is it part of technology? Is it its own function? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? Do you think there's a right or wrong? Should we start with a CDO, or should we start with someone more junior who then grows a team? Like, it's really difficult to know what works, but there is a lot of failed programs out there. There's a lot of failed leaders that are almost set up to fail because they're overpromised that they're going to have resource, money, time. But in the reality, we're seeing a lot of conversations on LinkedIn of CDOs not being successful, unfortunately, or heads of data not being successful. Some of them have had partners with consultancies, some haven't. What do you think the underlying reason is for that?
I think one of the biggest myths is that data is a technology issue, and it's not a technology issue. You can have the best tools in the world, but if data is not being viewed as a strategic business issue, everyone's got a role to play. Everyone from the people that are entering the data, from the front line to the C-suite, everyone's got a role to play. And and if if we sat in the technology side of things, you can scrap the old tool, put the new tool in. You're still going to have, and you have bad behaviors on the front line. You still have bad data. You'll still have data that you can't do anything with because it needs a lot of cleaning and needs a lot of structure. And the more cleaning that you're doing, the more data that's being created. So I think data is a strategic business issue. Everyone's got a role to play, and the technology teams can help enable that. But it's part of how do people view data as an asset? How do they treat it with care? Do they know when they put data in, what's the implications down the line? What are the teams that will be affected if I did not take care in putting this data in the system?
So do you think there's an element of blame then, and rather than taking responsibility, it's someone else's issue, for example?
I think it's understanding of how data plays within the organisation. If there's no lack of transparency of where that data flows and how it impacts other businesses, you're not going to feel the ownership or the accountability or the care or empathy to the other departments on that poor data. So I think it's raising the awareness and the education and then the shared ownership of that data. And that's why the data in action program at Coca-Cola worked really well, because we had guys from supply chain in the program working with guys in commercial, two sides of the engine, coming together in global peer-to-peer workshops and actually understanding how the data flows between the two departments, and then creating those networks, and then the ideas will come and the accountability comes and the ownership will come, the collaboration comes.
Yeah. And getting, I suppose, not granular, but understanding your process when it comes to discovery, because there are so many answers. If someone says, I want to adopt data strategy or do this, you need to know fully where they're at. And in terms of a mindset perspective, and hopefully they do understand that it's a company-wide thing. How long is that initial unearthing process for you? For consultancy in terms of recruitment, it's very similar. Someone gives us a job description, I'm like, that's great, but that's like 5%. I need to know the story behind the business, where you're at, the trajectory you're on, your goals. There's all kinds of things as a consultant to unearth. So how is that process for you as a business?
Yeah. So during the discovery assessment, we try and understand where the company is at on that journey. So understanding also what the culture is like in that organization. So what the leadership perspective and advocacy is, what works well in the communication engagement side of things, where they're at with the talent strategy, are they incorporating data and digital competencies in their frameworks, how are they vetting new hires with these data and digital capabilities, are they being assessed on these core competencies, and then also what's the education arrangements are like. Do they have a centralized LMS, or do we want to buy something different? What is it that has worked and hasn't worked? The metrics behind those engagement strategies as well. So it's understanding, how do people like to take on new information? What are the ways of working to embed that into their day-to-day routine? What are the communities of practice that can help us amplify this message on a larger scale? So it's understanding all the key enablers, but then also what are the key pain points? What are the low-hanging fruits? And then also where the key personas that they want to target, because you can't target everyone at once. What are the
No,
key
of course.
personas?
Yeah.
So then we can test a pilot, get the learnings from that, and then scale a little bit bigger. So it's understanding all those key factors and then targeting that key persona to test that initial initiative.
And how long would you say, again, it's like a piece of string, it depends on the business, but as a range, a successful transformation program, how long does a business need to commit to? I appreciate it's an ongoing journey afterwards, but initially for that change program.
Like you said, it's depending on the company's appetite. But I would say if you probably do 4 weeks of discovery, depending on who's involved, what the pilot is, key personas, and then how do you embed that data and AI initiative into existing practices? So what are the leadership programs that are going on? How do you embed it into that? What are the managers program that you can embed that? So you're not going start end in
Of
terms of a
course.
data and
Yeah.
AI program. You're embedding that into existing initiatives. So it's weaving that into the existing initiatives. So
Yeah.
so it'd be really quite dependent on the organisation. But like you said, it's got to be something that's ongoing. You can't just go, well, this is where the program stops and everyone goes back to their old habits and
Mhm.
like, okay, what are the routines of challenging each other, having the discussions, what are the new challenges that we can bring on board, to what are the hackathons that we can bring in, so things like that
Yeah.
to keep the energy going.
I think it's interesting that you say appetite as well, because so many businesses say they want to be data driven. It's become a buzzword in itself, hasn't it? Like, what does that mean? Like, do you question that? Like, okay, you want to be data driven. What does data driven mean to you?
Yeah.
Because I imagine that is what everyone's saying on the first discovery call. And you're
Exactly.
like, okay, let's see how data driven you really want to be.
Yeah. Well, it's about how people think about data, use data, talk about data. Like, what are the behavior you're seeing?
Mm.
What are the behaviors that we want
Mhm.
in the organization?
Yeah.
So what does data driven mean for you? Does that mean you have everyone using dashboards, or they are able to communicate better stories with data? What is it? It might be all of the above.
Yeah.
What is it what does success look like for
Yeah.
you? So
Yeah.
it's understanding that.
And I think it's interesting you talk about sustainable change and the 3 learnings. So are these your 3 learnings, or is this a framework? Because you've got learnings that stick, learnings by doing, and learning with others, and how they all contribute to sustainable change. Because that, I like that. I like the 3, the power of 3.
Yeah. So we're dealing with people. So I like to go, well, there's science-based approaches on neuroscience on how the brain works with learnings, and then there's behavioral science in terms of how people learn better in a social setting.
Mhm.
So the whole learning that sticks is, how many times have we gone through a cybersecurity course that's 3 hours long? Everyone's clicking through. We've got the certificate, we've got the badge, and then the next day they've clicked on a phishing email. So,
Whoops.
so how do we help? Like understanding how the brain learns, so the micro learning piece in terms of small chunks on a regular basis. So you're strengthening those neural pathways in your brain, and the whole how do we embed the learnings into the longer term memory? So if you're presenting data in an exec room, so you're just presenting the facts. Brain MRI scans show that one side of the brain's lit up, your information processing side of the brain has lit up, but you've got the rest of the brain. But if you tell a story with the data, and there's a whole science behind storytelling, if you tell a story with the data, you put the character in, you've got the tension, you've got the conflict. MRI scans show that your whole brain lights up.
Right.
So you've got a bigger web in your brain to capture the information. So these are science-based approaches that, how do we help people learn more with less effort? So, and why aren't we doing that? Why are we still doing 5-hour, 6-hour e-learning courses that doesn't actually change behavior? And then the whole learning with others. So there's a thing where if you teach someone, you actually learn 2 or 3 times more. So not only have you learnt something, you've processed it, digest it,
Yeah.
and you've had to then articulate it in a way that someone else understands it. So whether person A understood what you said and whether person B understands what you've said, it's different approaches. So you have to tailor your approach to break that complex issue down into a clear concepts. So you learn more by explaining it to others. So that's the whole social learning piece. And then there's a whole when you're in a group, there's a whole fear of being left behind, not the social pressures. So you're more intrinsically motivated to perform. So the whole FOMO aspect. So you've got the drive in terms of, okay, I want to perform. I want to show that I've understood this. I want to participate in this challenge. And then the last one on learning by doing is, you've learnt something. How do you apply that into your day to day? So you can read about driving, but you need to get behind the car
Of course.
and
Yeah.
understand what it's like being on the road. And so learning by doing, it's activating that and identifying the learning gaps by doing, and then you go back and, okay, where are the gaps that I've missed, and focus on building more learnings in that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're having different conversations dependent on who it is you're talking to. Interestingly, do you partner more with the C-suite who are non data, like not in the data department, or do you partner with data leaders, or is it both, a mix? What do you find
Yeah,
to be most successful?
it really depends on the company. Sometimes the data leaders understand there's a cultural mindset gap, and they like if for me to realize the value out of the investment in data and technology, I need the culture shift. Sometimes it's the people and culture leads, the HR leaders, that especially with AI, how do we redefine our workflows now that AI is coming? How do we incorporate data and digital capabilities into our frameworks, into our core competencies? How we integrate that into how people are being measured, their performance, their expectations. So it depends which way the company leans that I speak to. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you seen firsthand the power of storytelling and successfully?
Oh, yes. Uh, you just look at how good the tech talks are, and just that first 15, 20 minutes, that you're engrossed in someone's story, and you can tell the people that practice their storytelling techniques
Yes.
versus someone that's just put data on a slide and just talked through the data. First 5 minutes, people either glaze over or on their phones.
Death by PowerPoint.
Yeah. And or people that tells a story, they make it relatable. They're engrossed, and at the end of I think at the end of that day, it's like if you just present the facts, like 50% is gone. Like
Yeah.
it's forgotten. But if you're doing stories are remembered 22 times more than
Really?
facts.
Yeah.
So, and that storytelling piece is quite a soft skill to learn. It's not something you can get overnight. You've got to learn it, try it, get feedback on it, try again, assess yourself. So
Yeah.
it's something that you've got to build over time and invest in.
I've just thought about something actually. That really reminds me of my history A level because I got an A in Russian history because it was all stories about Rasputin and the Tsars, and I was so engrossed in it. And then the British history, I don't know why they picked this module, was in 1871, there was a reform of water. I mean, come on, I couldn't remember that. I was bored. So I got an E in that. How different is that? So overall, I was so upset with my C because I was like, I loved history. I found it fascinating. But yeah, the facts, I was like, my brain can't retain that knowledge. But the stories, I was like, yes, I know exactly that. And that I've proven that to myself. Actually, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting. It's 22% more likely to remember
Yeah.
if it's a story.
It's like when you're in the movies. How many times have you watching a movie and you feel what that main character is feeling? That storytelling, there's a lot of science behind the storytelling, about how, yes, your brain's open more, you've got that neurocoupling with the storyteller because people remember more when their feelings are being triggered. So how do you trigger the feelings and the so what in your data stories so that the decision makers know exactly what they remember your story and what they need to do, the support
Yeah.
that they need to give you that.
Interesting, the so what. And I'd like to talk about personal branding and the importance of that. Because of course, personal brand, when you've got a business, that is your business brand. When you're at Coca-Cola, was that a big thing for you? Or have you learnt the importance of it more so with having your own business?
That's a good question. I think personal branding at Coca-Cola was through speaking at forums within
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, people understanding what I did and inviting me to their team meetings. And it's, I guess, building that reputation or that energy around yourself that people goes, oh, I want a piece of that, and I want a piece of that knowledge or energy, and I want to hear what she's got to say. So I think I had a good personal brand in Coca-Cola, which led me to doing the data in action role, and then the whole personal branding and the business side of things is it's totally different because it's just you.
Yes.
And it was something that I developed overnight. I tried, tested different things, I got feedback from people, and then kind of finding my voice out there as well. What is it that makes me me, and what is it that people want to hear about, and what value I can bring to to people.
Yeah, there's some big personalities in the space. We both know Susan Walsh very well. She's like the queen of personal
Yeah,
branding.
love her.
And she's so brave and out there with it. And do you know what? I love the word out there because someone spoke about one of our Let's Talk Data events. It was Dawn Carter, and she used the word out there. I was like, I love that. You know, we're not trying to be out there, but we can't be something that we're not. And Susan's personality just shines through. But for some people, it's hard to be that open, you know, and balance between personal and professional. So how have you found that journey?
Through talking to a lot of people, kind of, because a lot of people go, why have you left Coca-Cola? Like that's probably one of the key questions I get asked. And so it's a bit of a self-discovery in terms of, why did I do it? What is my aim? What fires my belly to do what I do? And I think with AI, everyone's seeing so many AI generated content. People want the authentic self. And so in some ways, the personal stories, the you know, the failures, you need to, they want to hear that you're real.
Yeah, of course.
And so that personal branding is, okay, what is it that you stand for? What are the value that you want to bring? What's your personality? And just, I guess, yeah, take a bet on yourself in terms of, well, try it, see how it goes. Do little by little and refine it as you go.
Yeah, I love that. And people buy from people, as we know. And it's awesome that you've been featured in Data and AI magazine. Is this the May issue?
Yes.
Issue 10 for anyone you can see here, for those watching on YouTube. So tell us about this. How did you become featured in the magazine? Because that's amazing.
So I got asked to present at an AI conference in Munich last year in October, and I spoke about the human element. I was holding the innovation stage, and we had 3 startups do a bit of a pitch in the voting event. But I started the innovation stage on, we're talking a lot about data and AI here. Have we considered the human element, the people, the user that's driving this adoption? And the CEO of the Data and AI magazine came up to me and goes, "We really want you to join our May
Oh,
issue."
she was in the audience.
Yeah, he was in the audience,
Yeah.
and that's how it all started.
Amazing. And it's a special, is it? Women Leaders special.
Yes.
Yeah, I've read the full article. It was amazing. And also, congratulations on being recognised as a finalist for the Data Leader of the Year supplier category at the British Data Awards.
Yay.
So that recognition is amazing. So we all like to be recognised. Like, you can give yourself a pat on the back, but when the industry, your peers, friends, family recognise as well, it does feel a little bit different, doesn't it? So what does that recognition mean to you?
It feels like I'm being heard in the industry, that I am taking myself out on quite a bit of a limb on this investment to myself, and the approach and how the approach and how I've been talking to people, trying to understand what their problems are, and building that community and network. And I think there's about 20 judges on that panel, so it's like the submission was judged by 20 people, and just being recognised, especially so early on in this journey, it was probably I almost fell off my chair when I got that email. So it means a lot. It means more than I can express, but it does mean a lot in terms of getting that recognition and just celebrating that journey so far.
Of course, yeah. And to be nominated is amazing. Fingers crossed there that you win. And when do we find out?
I think it's 14th of May.
14th of May.
That's when the awards.
So how does the future look for XcelerateIQ and yourself personally?
So hoping to make a bigger impact in terms of how do we get more businesses put people at the beginning of their transformation, not during their tech processes.
Can't be an afterthought.
Yeah, not after they switch their process on. How do we put people at the beginning of it? And I think putting people at the beginning, it makes the process so much easier down the line. You have people advocating for the new tool or the new processes. It just actually makes it easier and gives the people the time to change their ways of working, bring the buy-in before the system or tool gets switched on. And the fact that change is so quick in terms of how AI is developing.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing now. It's bridging the whole cognitive capabilities about how we use what is in our brains, bridging between the mind and the machine. How do we use our words in a way that machines can understand what output we want it to do, and continually striving on that, because it's constantly changing. The models are changing, so it's continually adapting to that change. And I think at the moment, especially the whole education piece, it's like skills are being skilled. How do we measure knowledge now?
Yeah, that's a good point.
If there's a case where ChatGPT enrolled in a graduate course, and it participated in the forums, it took on the online discussions, and it got rated a 99.36, so an A.
Wow.
And so if a machine can beat more than half the class, are we measuring knowledge in the right way? And I think that's a really key question to ask, in terms of how do we shift the skill set of the workforce to things that machine can't replace, and
Yeah.
really nurture that human element. And what is the human element that would help the machines do better work for
Yeah.
us? There was, I think, the Gallup report came out recently, and they're saying employee engagement has reduced from, I think, 30% to 27%, and that's a loss in global productivity of $438 million.
Wow.
And so it's like, if we engage the employees, it could unlock like a 9 trillion product, growth in their business. So how do we use AI to help engage the employers back in their work? How do we? I always like take this on a personal view when I'm talking to people or teams. Is like, you've got one life.
Mm.
The technology is there to help you with certain mundane, repetitive tasks that take time and energy. How do you use technology to do that type of work that frees up time for the creativity stuff, the strategic stuff, the things that light the fire in people, help people be more engaged at work? And then that has a flow-on effect on the productivity growth side of things. So, but I say, how do you use technology to help you love your day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. A real enabler for
Yeah.
sure. So we'll move on to the quick fire data lightning round.
Okay.
What is a myth in data that you'd like to debunk?
That data doesn't speak for itself.
Yes.
Humans speak, data doesn't speak.
Oh.
And there's a story where there's a native neuroimaging study. So 70 different neuroimaging teams, they got given MRI brain scans, and they disagreed on 5 out of the 9 hypotheses.
Right.
So same data,
Yeah.
different teams, experts, and they still got different outcomes.
Right.
So data doesn't speak for itself. You need the human touch to bring it to life, back to that storytelling piece.
Love that one. We've not had that before. Next one, name a book, event, or podcast that every data enthusiast should listen to or go to or explore.
I'll go events, because I get a lot of energy from events. So Big Data London's one of my favourites. It's massive. You have people flying in from all over the world, and it's a lot to offer from wherever you are on that journey.
Yeah.
So you can pick whether you want to go really technical, or actually you're starting on your journey. There's something for everyone, and there's a real buzz around that event. And the other one, I love the Women in Data flagship event.
So good.
The one that happened in March, one of my key memories was Maggie Afonso. Her session was, who are you? And the thing is, we always ask, who are you? And we always answer with, oh, well, this is my title, this is the company.
We let that define us.
What's our role in our families? But then when you go, well, who are you? What makes you tick? What makes you unique? And I think that was really quite quite empowering to go, what is it? What makes me, or or you? So those two events.
Yeah, interesting concept. Finish this sentence. Data is the key to
Challenging our assumptions and intuitions. So it's having that objectivity to challenge our gut feel, something to help us make better decisions that helps rules out any bias that we've got, any hidden insights. So it's challenging our gut feels.
Yeah, good one as well. Name a piece of advice that you'd give to someone just starting their career in the world of data.
That technical skills isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
I always say you need to focus on your soft, I say power skills.
I like that. Yeah, not soft, they're powerful.
Yeah, they're power skills. And the thing is, they're quite hard work.
Yeah, they are. They're not easy. Soft makes them sound like meh, easy.
Exactly. So it's like, how do you communicate with people? How do you articulate your ideas? How do you influence, motivate people? How do you build the trust with people that don't work with data? So how do you bring them on board through the soft power skills?
Power skills. I'll be using that one myself. And last one, what is a data buzzword that you love to hate?
Oh, I'll give you two.
Yeah, I love that there's two.
Okay, first one's data fabric. I'm like, it's got that knitting and sewing connotation. And the other one is, I say data lake. I love fishing. Every time I hear that, I'm like, bring it on my rod. I feel like putting the line in. So,
I know, they're crazy, aren't they? And I think people, again, just disengage. They're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. That's not interesting. Surely we can do better. Yeah. Well done. That's it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much. Yeah.